The latest Minecraft Bedrock preview has a single line buried in the changelog about how trial chambers will generate on the same locations as they do on the Java edition. In other words, parity between the two versions of Minecraft. This is a huge announcement, however, parity doesn't necessarily mean parity, as we'll discover when we load up this seed on Bedrock and find the Bedrock's actually missing, and then load up the same seed on Java and find out it's the trial chamber that's gone. Go underneath it and you'll see that there's a very beautiful view here on Bedrock, whereas there is nothing like this on Java. Ironically, there's a lot more Bedrock on Java, and so today I figured it'd be interesting to look at what parity actually means for Minecraft trial chambers, because it is very different than you might expect, what it actually leads to in terms of difference in structures, and then also what the positives of this are, because for Bedrock this means you can now officially mine for trials, and I think a lot of us are going to have the question of, is it actually faster to mine for trial chambers, strip mine for them, than to mine for copper at the ideal layer? And funnily enough, I've done this experiment, and so I have the answers, which we'll dive into with today's Parity Seed Sunday for 1.21. Hello, I'm Toycat, and sorry I had to leave behind the room with the hole in the floor because it was reminding me just a little bit too much of my real house. But anyway, I'm here in the entrance room to the trial chamber to give you the entrance to this video, which exists because parity is something I've always been fascinated by on this channel, because Minecraft really is trying to have two identical versions of the game, but so many issues get in the way that lead to some fun, weird bugs we're gonna have to talk about today. And indeed, as a Bedrock player, you kind of have to be aware as to what these things are. And so even as they bring true parity to the trial chamber, if you take the entrance room, literally the first room of the structure as it's meant to generate, you can see that it's at nearly the exact same place on Java, but just slightly different, notably about 20 blocks higher up in the sky. However, I was expecting, because this was in such a different place, the rest of the structure would also generate entirely differently. And so on the Java edition, you walk down a long hallway, the trial hallway if you will, you end up in a T-junction room where you could go right up the stairs or left, and then if you go left, you end down another long hallway, there's a staircase room, and then there is a trial with a breeze in it. And if we are to do this exact same journey, however we do it on the Bedrock edition, we walk down one of these long hallways from our entrance room. Okay, that's expected. We get into a T-junction with a staircase, a right entrance, and then also a left one. And if we go down that left, then things are different because, oh wait, no, there's actually a hallway here too. And even weirder than this is when we get to the end of this hallway, because it is quite a decently long one. Honestly, there's a lot of running around to be done in trial chambers in their fullest extent. You'll end up in one of these big rooms with a breeze spawner and everything. Even more crazy, in my opinion, is the fact that you'll find there are vines in here too. It is identical down to that level, although they'll generate in a different place. For some reason, they're generating around the chains here, which makes no sense. The vines, they wouldn't grow on the chains like that, but, you know, welcome to Minecraft logic. The fact that it gets that similar is really, really interesting, and led me to almost believe that they were identical structures until I went up this staircase on Bedrock, and unlike on the Java edition, there is for some reason a piece of floating redstone there, which almost sounds like a bug, and so got me curious. The reason that this structure generates with Bedrock missing on the Bedrock edition is because it's already down at y minus 31, or rather actually, it's even lower. It's down at y minus 36, because from here we go up 2 blocks, and then there is a little bit of an entrance out over here, or an exit, depending on, you know, which way you want to see how doors work. You know, are we on the inside now, or are we inside now? Are we inside in both ways? You know, think about it for a little bit, but also consider the fact that when we go down there, we end up going down a staircase that takes us to minus 46, and then there's another staircase before the actual trial, which takes us down to y minus 54. Obviously, the structure is more than 12 blocks tall, and so we don't end up with a Bedrock layer. How is it that this exact same structure generates on Java? Is it possible that they have the same thing, but just functional? Well, let's go over there right now and find out. Well, first of all, let me just say that vines don't generate any better on the Java edition, because this is where it decided to generate. I mean, it's so close to knowing that could it be on the side of a block and then it just decides to be over there. Let's also point out that this trial chamber room is technically different. It does have a breeze in it, but it has a giant pillar there too. But then let's go up the staircase. Let's take a quick glance and say that, oh, there's no spawner there at all, let alone one with redstone. Then let's go down the staircase. Let's try and end up over here, actually. So we'll go down this one and then up over here, and let's see what... Oh, wait a minute. I see something odd here. The door seems to be missing. In fact, taking a closer look, you can see that this hallway is actually much shorter, which leads me to a very interesting conclusion, because also, if you look at this room, it's very different to the one before, and even more interesting than both of those things is what happens when we go up here, because if I recall, there were 2 red beds on the Bedrock edition, but on Java, it's 4 separate colors. And so, what actually has happened here is the fundamental bones seem to have moved perfectly between the editions, but even if we go into spectator mode to actually look at the structure from third person, you'll see that there aren't big staircases coming off this room. In fact, there are no staircases coming out of this room on this side, and on this side we have a staircase going up, followed by another staircase going up, but this one ends up inside of Vanthus Geode, which is funny in my opinion. But yeah, these staircases go up on the Java edition, which might actually be a smart representation of where it is in the world, whereas on Bedrock they go down. In other words, the basic structure pieces, the most important ones, the entrance room, the junctions, the stairs, and the corridors, they are perfectly copied between Java and Bedrock, but they appear in different lengths with different loot pieces and different spawners, etc. But every single other room hasn't actually had true parity applied, because if they did, this would actually work just fine. Funnily enough, if you imagine where we are right now, so I gotta check F3, we're at -18, so we can afford to take a 10 block full to end up at the bottom of that staircase. Then we could go down another 10 blocks, and then we could have a full trial chamber be in this cave right here, and it still would not have any issues with breaking the bedrock below it, which means that, yeah, the bedrock generation looks like it's more fun and more vertical in some ways. Oh, in fact, here we go. We have some proof of a trial spawner all the way down at Y-38. Bedrock seems to have a little bit more variance and verticality in there. However, verticality, I should say. However, interestingly, there are some differences with how the structure generates otherwise. And so, what does this actually mean for you as a player of Bedrock, assuming this is not to be fixed? Wow, this is such an interesting spawn. Look at all the things that you find intersecting with this on Java. It used to be this was something Bedrock was famous for, like they had basically no collision checks between structure, but interestingly enough, it's Java now that doesn't really care if it generates in a cave, hypothetically. By the way, look how close this is to the entrance actually being an entrance, whereas Bedrock is the one that does not allow trial chambers to be visible, right? Oh, actually. So I just loaded up a new world using the seed trial, and funnily enough, it looks like I have a trail ruins at spawn. However, this is using the old generation, and so when I /locate trial chambers, you'll see that I have to go 574 blocks away. This is a lot worse than the current version, where you should never travel more than a couple hundred. However, when we get there, something interesting will probably occur. And once I make it here, you'll notice something very odd, which is that there is a big cave here. It's a very much natural 1.18 style cave, but there's this big block in the middle, and it's weird because big blocks in the middle of caves shouldn't be surprising in Minecraft, but these big blocks do a pretty good job, for the most part, unless there's caves inside of them, at hiding the trial chambers and every other structure in Minecraft that's meant to be fully submerged, even if that means that the cave around it looks incredibly odd. And boy, can you tell that this looks odd. This is a natural part of Minecraft, but yeah, if you ever do see one of these in your world, if it's perfectly flat, you can usually mine about 5 or 6 blocks in, and you'll find a trial chamber. Look at this trial chamber, and you'll notice something also that's quite interesting, which is it has just one big hallway. In the case of this trial chamber, it's an incredibly long hallway. Seriously, look at the size of this. This is so many blocks from one side to the other. But there is just one hallway, something I wanted to back up by finding another trial chambers, but there's no other trial chambers within a reasonable distance, which is very funny. So now let's compare this exact same seed, but after the update they just rolled out to the beta. This is definitely the same seed, and you can tell that because there's a trail ruins right here, I'm fairly sure. But however, if we try the exact same command from before, /locate structure trial chambers _true, or we could just use the regular command, you'll see that the nearest one is now 440 blocks away. Also, it's in a different direction, interestingly. So now we'll head in that direction. Once we make it there, you'll notice there is another beautiful 1.18 cave. I love that these things exist. I love that they sometimes have multiple layers, but you'll notice in the bottom layer of this one, there is a lot of exposed tough brick. It looks like Minecraft still is trying to hide it. This is better than I've seen on most of the seeds I've checked out so far, but you can tell that there is some amount of obfuscation that's meant to be going on. It's not even perfect squares like the other one, but then just peeking out the top of it is the trial chambers. In the same way that you might find an abandoned mineshaft, or you might find a ruined portal just exposed to the world, as you can definitely find in the case of this world, you can also see that that is true happening over here, something which is absolutely fascinating. You can see, looking around all of these caves, almost all of the time that Tough Brick comes into surface with the world, they just don't bother covering it up like they would before, and therefore, from the perspective of Minecraft, who try to hide this very well, it was actually better in the previous version than it is right now, which is very interesting. They've made an upgrade in one way. I guess they arguably they made an upgrade to the findability of these structures, and then at the same time, they also made an upgrade to how you would find them once you're in the right cave. This is something, you know, once you look on the inside and you see that the structure layouts are different because they're entirely different structures in the same places now. This one doesn't have as ludicrously long a hallway, for example, even though it's got the same basic vibe of the entrance room into a hallway into a structure. It is very, very interesting to see that the exact same structure looks different and also has a kind of new bug that is introduced, which then raises some questions about, well, is this better? And I would just like to say for this that personally, this is a weird case of where if you are a Minecraft developer, if you're Mojang, you'd look at this and probably say that you introduced a new bug by moving from the Bedrock system to the Java system. I'm glad they did from a finding the perspective, but also I would say that this is a bug that they probably don't actually need to fix, right? I think that one of the beautiful things about Minecraft is how stuff like this can happen. The story you'll have if you dig into a cave and you see one of those from a distance is actually more fun than if you just happen to be strip mining and find your way into one, which means that given there's no official way to find the trial chamber yet, there's no IF ender like with the stronghold, this might actually be a good idea to just accept as a permanent feature. That is to say, again, I think that would have to change if they introduce some way to find the entrance more officially, which you feel like they have to do to have a room called the entrance. If you were to go into this cave, for example, the entrance is the furthest away room from you. You would spawn into a trial and then have to work your way back to the safe room, which feels kind of odd, but that ultimately could be Minecraft. And because I do think that the game works best when they lean into the jank of weird coding that happens, rather than trying to have a perfectly bug-free game. Accepting that some bugs make Minecraft better might not be a bad idea. But again, that's me speaking as someone who doesn't know what they intend to do with the trial chamber and officially finding them and the entrance and all that. However, I do have my own question, which is how long does it now take to find a trial chamber? I mentioned a couple of weeks ago in Seed Sunday that finding trial chambers in Bedrock was very unreliable and inconsistent, and although I gave the best way to find it, I want to know right now, how long would it take to find a trial chamber? And then also, so looking at this diagram, everyone loves this classic explanation of the world, which shows you that y minus 48 or so is where you'll find the most copper, and just mining at these layers will find you a ludicrous amount of copper ore. However, would it be better, obviously everyone knows that if you find a trial chamber already, if you've already found one, it's better just to take the copper from that, because mining copper blocks is more efficient than mining the occasional copper ore. But is it more effective over, let's say, an hour period to mine for copper ore or to mine for a copper structure? And this is something I figured I had to find out, and so I've done the testing. Let's reveal the results. So the question I want to resolve is it faster to mine for copper ore or to mine for copper blocks via the trial chambers? This is obviously a question which comes with some loaded answers, like if you are using an X-ray mod, you might find copper easier. If you use chunk base, you might find trial chambers easier. But I want to know, for the average player who's playing legit survival Minecraft, what is a better bet for you to dig for if you have a time span of, say, an hour? As your time span gets longer and longer, your odds of finding a trial chamber increase, but I think an hour is a rough amount of time you might put towards finding copper ore if you were to try and do that. And so for the comparison, what I did is I mined copper for an hour. You might have seen the stream. I went mining for an hour and 12 minutes on a seed I did not know the location of copper ore for, and I found 420 copper blocks in that time. This is almost exactly 350 raw copper blocks, or the equivalent of 3,150 raw copper, which I could smelt up, and it would take some smelting time, but let's assume that's a positive for the experience. That would give me 3,150 50 copper ingots. How many copper ingots would you find on average if you were to go looking for a trial chamber? Obviously, in theory, you could go mining for a decade and never find a trial chamber because of randomness, but if you were to do an average search, well, let's find out the answer to that by using pure randomness. Rather than using chunk base to know exactly where a trial chamber is, let's instead go to a random set of 5 coordinates. I found the coordinates by going to this random website and having it pick ones between -1,000 and +1,000. If you're at a random point in your world and you go to the ideal mining spot for trial chambers, how long does it take you to find one? So now we've got 5 random points and we're going to dig down from them to about -20. Now we're going to dig in a straight line randomly from each of these. This will tell us how long it takes us to find a trial chamber, and rather than using one random point where we might get really lucky or unlucky, we'll have 5 separate data points, and each of those data points will give me a good bet as to how long it takes me to find a trial chamber, and then once I'm in one, using the remaining time, I can work out how much copper I could find. Again, assuming that we have a decent set of torches and all of the gear that we need, a diamond pickaxe included too. How much copper will we find per hour this way? Well, let's calculate it. By the way, if you're curious, I'm not actually going to be mining the entire way, but instead I've worked out that using this pickaxe takes me about 10 seconds to go 6 blocks, because it takes just under a second to mine a block, and there's 2 for every one that I need to travel, and so now we can see how far it is we have to go in this straight line using my classic favorite command. Yeah, that's right, it's /fill, and oh, we might find some good friends while we do that. Yeah, this is a bit of a danger you might encounter, by the way. You will have a lot more fun of a time if you choose to use these. We're also choosing to ignore the copious number of diamonds that you'll find while looking for this, as we are currently 6 minutes in, by the way. Update, by the way, I'm 3,000 blocks into the tunnel, and I found 3 mine shafts, but no trial chambers yet. So our first result... Man, it's so ridiculously loud. Why is weather like that? What are you doing up there, Weather? So it's not looking good for the trial chamber method after the first dig, because as you can see, we dug over an hour's worth in one direction, and by doing it all in a straight line, we encountered 0 trial chambers, despite being at what is meant to be an ideal height for them, around the -20 layer. It could have been that we went directly just above or under one. It could be that one of the caves we ran into, if we'd have searched through them entirely, we'd have found something. But so far, I can honestly say that you could spend a full hour, and bear in mind that mining 5,000 blocks almost is the equivalent of going through an entire unbreaking diamond pickaxe and then almost another one. You could spend 2 full diamond pickaxes and have 0 copper to your name. In this first case, that would have happened. So our first result was you would find 0 copper in the span of an hour, but now I've gone to the second set of points and I'll try the exact same thing, but digging in another random direction to see which one this, or how long this takes me to find a trial chamber too. I was very shocked to learn that you could go 5,000 blocks and not encounter one, but that is how RNG works, so let's see how it works now if we're digging just to the left from some random point in my world, because you never know where the trial chambers are in your world. There is no official mechanism to find. This is meant to be what you're doing, and by the way, the Minecraft wiki says that they try to generate between -20 and -40, so the average point you should dig for is about -30, is what you might guess, but my actual, I dug into this a couple weeks ago, and the actual average spawn point for the trial chamber is much closer to -20, because they can go up just as much as they can go down. So keep that in mind, that's why we're mining at -20. This is the best layer, as best I can tell. It's just we haven't encountered anything yet, but let's see if that changes. So the official amount of time it takes to mine a block of copper is 0.6 seconds, and therefore, if you have a minute, you should be able to mine 100 blocks of copper. Obviously, this assumes perfect switching from one to the other, and no time required to actually put stuff in chests, etc. I think that if you're taking into account human error and the need to store blocks after a certain point, you can mine much closer to 60 copper blocks per minute. And given that we now have about 50 minutes left, I would say that realistically gives you around 3,000 copper or 27,000 copper ingots as your realistic end state. That is actually quite incredible. However, it relies on you being here in peaceful mode. When you're in peaceful, no mobs will spawn, and also it makes the massive overestimation that you can actually get every single copper in this place with absolutely no issues and nothing respawning. If you were to play on a difficulty where the trial chambers activate, as about 90% of Minecraft players do, then obviously you'd have to account at least another 10 minutes for that, but we're still talking about a mining method that is at least 5 to 6 times more effective, because once you find a trial chamber, you can get a lot of copper blocks, and then you also get a lot of tough blocks as a bonus. Already, just from what we've done so far, we have this many copper blocks, which is this many ingots, and that should let you know that you're in for a good time if you do it this way. Actually, you know, can you turn a oxidized copper block back into ingots? Or do you have to... You have to use an axe for some of this first too. So, you know, do keep in mind that this isn't a perfectly efficient strategy, but, you know, the numbers speak for themselves. It's a lot more. So before we move into the next test, I just want to point out that I think I've experienced both ends of the extreme spectrum of variability that you can actually encounter on this, which is to say, you might get literally 20,000 copper in an hour, or you might get 0 compared to the much more consistent method of mining, but we'll see how inconsistent or consistent it really is as we move to our third set of coordinates. From this third set of coordinates, I'm also just going to dig in a straight line, and now we'll do the next 3 sets of results and skip forward so you can see what actually happens. Which do you think is more likely right now, though, that we encounter a lot more no trial chambers, or that we find them very quickly and then get large amounts at the end? Well, I won't spoil anything for you. In fact, I don't know myself, but let's find out. Okay, the results are in, and I have to say, this last one is just the most disappointing because it took just over 3,600 blocks, so just over 60 minutes to get here, and has to be said, by the way, going through more than a full diamond pickaxe is a big cost, but still, it means that you got 0 copper, even though by the end of the hour, you would have had a great resource to get more. However, the full purpose of the experiment was just to compare 60 minutes of copper mining versus 60 minutes of copper structure mining, and the end results are as so. Here are the 5 separate digging results we did. 3 of them resulted in no trial chamber within 60 minutes, but 2 of them did, one within 10 minutes and one within 8, and that means that we would have 40 and 42 minutes to mine for copper respectively. Assuming that we could keep to 60 copper blocks per minute, which means 0.4 seconds per second of waste, which seems very reasonable, then we would have, as you can see right here, tens of thousands of copper ingots, about 25,000 per trial chamber that we could find with just the remaining time that we had. This means that the average result for trial chamber mining is actually 8,856 copper ingots versus the result of 3,150 for copper mining, and therefore, based on the average, the mean value, it would be 100% fair to say that the logical thing to do is always to mine for copper by looking for this structure. Mojang has accidentally made copper ore pointless, you might say, if you have 1 hour to spend, and indeed, over longer horizons, the results just get more and more skewed towards the trial chamber. However, I do think it's worth mentioning at least a little bit about the difference between median and mean. And I know that people love to nitpick this and act as if you care about the difference between averages, but trust me, it is important to know the difference between mean and median, because mean is the type that most people are taught in school. You take all of the data values and then you divide them by the number that there are, and so if you had 3 people, one with £1, one with 1,000, and one with 3 million, the average wealth is about £1 million. However, that doesn't actually take into account the average experience. The average is 1 million, but no one really has 1 million. One person is much wealthier, one person is much poorer, and one person, the 1,000 person, is the median wealth because he is the middle value, and it's a real experience which you can qualitatively talk about. That is why it's used a lot when you're talking at least sociologically, and that is why when you look at a map of median wealth per person, you'll see that the United States is actually slightly lower than, say, its neighbor to the north, which is poorer per person in some other ways, because of the fact that in the US there is much more income inequality, income distribution, whichever way you want to say it, whereas in Canada it's much less, and many other Western nations, which effectively means that in the United States there is more mean wealth per person, and so the the average amount of money is much higher, but it is distributed in a way which means there are much bigger high rolls, but also the low rolls are much worse, and therefore the middle person is doing slightly poorer than in other countries, and that is a very interesting thing to talk about. because a lot of people will try to make some grand political point, but trust me, I'm going to link this into Minecraft, because if you think about these 5 different trial chamber mining runs we did, effectively by doing them, we have simulated not 5 different people and working out the equality between them, but 5 different versions of you. Would you be willing to, on a, you know, not on a how we divide resources between each other basis, but on a personal level, would you be willing to take a 3 in 5 chance of not finding a trial chamber for a 2 in 5 chance of getting so much more? You get the equivalent of 9 hours worth of mining, and all you've got to do is take a 40%, a 60% risk, perhaps you could say. You got to try and go for a 40% chance. I think that a lot of people would say, yeah, actually, and here's the thing, you can look at this data also and say, well, even in the other cases, in the 60-minute trial chamber, if you'd have just said when you found it, okay, I'll turn this into 90 minutes now, if you kind of work to the odds and keep working until you get to that point, a lot of people would say that, yeah, actually, the trial chamber gets better and better over time, and so if you're willing to just keep on going till you find one, you will find that pretty great. And also you'll find other resources along the way. And so in reality, if you look at this and say that you're only going to spend 1 hour, it's a terrible idea to go mining for a trial chamber. If you have less than an hour even, it's also a much worse idea. But in the same way that the US has, it's very widely known about that the median wealth is the lowest there, but people know about the high rolls, people know about the very wealthiest, and that is what attracts them, because if you're the sort of person who wants to, air quotes, make your own luck, if you're the sort of person who's willing to go crazy in that way, you might find that to be appealing. And so this was an accidental point about income inequality around the world that I've raised while trying to talk about Minecraft roles, but that is the important thing to know about median versus mean. If you're the sort of person who says that people just do the amount they do and they happen to get what they get, then that is why the median is very important to you. But if you're the sort of person who believes that actually the total amount on offer is what matters because I will keep going until I get it, then you should go mining for the trial chamber. I hope this isn't an accidental political point in a Minecraft video, but I would like to say that I hope you enjoyed it regardless. I hope you found it very interesting, because for now, I will have to see you in the next one, or maybe not, I don't know for sure. Thank you for watching. I am going to briefly be taking a little break. I'm going for Monday and Tuesday. I've got a very important personal event. I'll be talking about it in a Let's Play, which will be going up soon. Thank you for being here, appreciate you existing, and I look forward to seeing more about the trial chamber, because right now I look at it still and I wonder, why would you want all this copper to begin with? That's the ultimate question. It's like, is paper money really worth anything, or is it worth what other people are willing to give you for it? Indeed, the same is true for copper. What is Mojang willing to give you for your copper? And also, I think it's worth asking, will there be a real entrance to this thing? Because that would upend the calculations entirely. If these get any amount more accessible, then there'll be no reason to mine copper, whereas right now, mining copper makes sense for short periods of time, or people who don't like the high rolls, they don't like the risk of mining for hours and only finding diamonds and beautiful lava pits. But anyway, with that said, hope you'll enjoy the video, because I'll see you next time. Goodbye.